What would happen when a 9-year-old girl stops beside a broken-down Mustang in the middle of rural Georgia? A ruby ring glimmers on her finger, and a man steps out. With just a few words exchanged, a dark past buried for 15 years suddenly resurfaces. That ring was once a promise. Now it's evidence of a crime hidden behind money, power, and silence. Subscribe and comment to let us know your city or country. Let's see how far this story spreads. The late afternoon sun cast long shadows across the quiet Georgia back road as Eva Monroe made her way home from school. At just 9 years old, she carried herself with the quiet resilience of someone who had faced more in life than many twice her age. Her old backpack bounced against her back, weighed down not just by textbooks, but by a cloth bundle containing a wrench set gifted to her by Uncle Jerome, a man who raised her with firm hands and a full heart. She hummed softly, stepping over roots that curled up through the cracked pavement of the roadside. Spring was just starting to soften the earth, and the warm breeze carried the scent of pine and diesel. It was a familiar route, worn into her feet by repetition, but today something unfamiliar broke the routine. Parked just off the road, tilted slightly on the gravel shoulder, was a sleek black Mustang GT. The hood was up. A tall man in a worn leather jacket stood beside it, phone pressed to his ear, and a look of growing frustration carved into his face. "I don't care who you send. I'm halfway between Valdosta and nowhere," the man barked into the phone. "I've done everything I can. It won't start." Eva slowed her steps, taking in the scene. The man didn't belong here. Even from a distance, she could tell. His boots were too clean, his jacket too nice. And then there was something about his voice, the way it echoed in her memory like a scene from a movie. The man hung up with a sigh and shoved his phone into his back pocket. He looked at the engine like it had betrayed him. "Excuse me, mister," Eva called, approaching the car with measured confidence. "You need help?" The man looked up, startled by the small voice. His eyes, still shadowed behind dark sunglasses, narrowed as he studied the girl in her worn-out sneakers and school uniform. Yeah, maybe. Radiator overheated, I think." His voice was rough, but his posture softened a notch. Eva came closer, her brow furrowed. "You smell anything sweet, like syrup?" "Now that you mention it, yeah. That's your coolant. You've got a leak." She crouched next to the car, eyes sharp. "See that puddle down there?" she pointed. "That's where you're losing it. The gasket's probably cracked." Stallone blinked, thrown off by her certainty. "How do you know that?" "My uncle fixes cars. I help him. He says cars are like people. You have to listen to what they're trying to tell you." She set her backpack down and unwrapped the towel, revealing a compact toolkit and a small emergency coolant patch kit. "I've got something that'll hold it till you get to town. It's not perfect, but it'll keep you from frying your engine." The man hesitated, then stepped back and let her work. Eva leaned into the engine's compartment with practiced ease, locating the leak and securing it with quick, confident hands. She moved like someone used to doing this, someone who'd been taught with care. Stallone watched, amused and impressed. "You're really 9?" he asked. "Almost 10, she replied, not looking up. "I'm small for my age." When she finished, she wiped her hands on an old rag and straightened up. "Give it 10 minutes before you try starting it again. And fill the radiator with bottled water if you don't have coolant." He grabbed 2 water bottles from his car and did as instructed. She watched him carefully, arms crossed like a mechanic inspecting a trainee. "I'm Sylvester," he said finally, wiping his hands. Sylvester Stallone. I know, Eva said with a shrug. Uncle Jerome watches your movies. I like Rocky. It's about never giving up. He smiled, clearly touched. I'm Eva Monroe, she added. Nice to meet you, Mr. Stallone. As she reached out to shake his hand, the sun hit her fingers just right, and he saw it, the ring, a deep ruby set in a gold band that was far too big for her small hand, held in place by loops of black thread. His smile faded. That ring, he said quietly, staring. Eva looked down, instinctively covering it. It was my mom's. She gave it to me before she died last year. Said it came from someone who made a promise. He couldn't breathe for a second. The image flashed in his mind, a tiny baby wrapped in a blanket, a young nurse cradling her, and a ring, that ring, slipping onto the infant's finger like a token of hope. Sunrise, he muttered. Eva's eyes widened. You know that word? He nodded slowly. Sunrise Children's Home, Charleston. I visited 15 years ago. My mom sometimes said that word in her sleep, and sometimes she called me Lily. Her voice cracked slightly, but I didn't know why. Sylvester Stallone stared at her, shaken. I think, Eva, I knew you. When you were a baby? I gave that ring to a little girl named Lily, before the home was shut down. I never knew what happened to her. She looked at him, breath held. Do you think that's me? I think it has to be, he said. The Mustang's engine sputtered and hummed, the temporary patch holding. But for Stallone, the machine wasn't what had just been fixed. It was something far deeper that had just been opened. A connection across time. A shadow from the past come alive again. Let me take you home, he said quietly. I want to talk to your uncle. There's something we need to figure out. Eva nodded, clutching her backpack close. She slid into the passenger seat of the repaired Mustang. Eva guided him toward the dirt drive that led to her house. The old sign read, Monroe Auto and Salvage. Uncle Jerome stood on the porch, wiping grease from his hands with a rag. His eyes narrowed when he saw the unfamiliar car. What in God's name is this? He muttered, stepping forward. Eva waved from the passenger seat. Uncle Jerome, I brought someone. He needs help. And he knew Mom. Jerome stared at the man who climbed out of the driver's seat, taking off his sunglasses slowly. You're Sylvester Stallone. I'm here about Sarah, Sly said. And just like that, the past came roaring back. Inside the Monroe house, the smell of engine grease, tobacco, and old coffee clung to the air like wallpaper. Jerome moved with purpose, his tall frame still sharp with military discipline despite the years. He didn't say much as he poured 2 mugs of coffee and set them on the scarred wooden table, but his eyes never left Sylvester Stallone. Eva sat quietly on a nearby chair, her fingers tracing the rim of the ruby ring, her mind spinning with fragments of memories and questions that suddenly had new weight. Sylvester, Sly, took a slow sip, then began. I visited Sunrise about 15 years ago. It was a quiet place, not much funding, but it had heart. I was there for a charity drive. Publicity, you know. I've done a lot of things in my life that didn't mean much. That visit did. There was this baby girl, Lily. She had the biggest, saddest eyes I'd ever seen. And a nurse, Sarah, told me she had no visitors, no family. She'd been left with nothing but a blanket and a ring. That ring? He pointed to Eva's hand, his voice thick. I gave it to her. Said I'd come back, but when I did, the place was gone. Just, gone. Jerome didn't blink. Sarah never told me all that. She just said there were things going on at that home, things she couldn't live with. One day she packed a bag, quit her job, and brought home a baby girl. Said her name was Eva now. Told me to keep my mouth shut and raise her right. He looked at Sly, eyes hard. So I did. Eva's voice was barely above a whisper. Why would someone shut down a place that was supposed to help kids? Sly exhaled. Because it wasn't just about helping kids. Rick Harrison, he was a friend of mine once, known for running pawn shops, but his real business was in private trades, antiques, rare artifacts, high-value items that didn't always have clean paperwork. He was one of the quiet donors of Sunrise, used it to scout for assets, children with no paper trail, no guardians, no questions. He'd place them with families who paid the right price, some for adoption, others for worse. Jerome's hands tightened around his mug. You saying Rick was trafficking kids? I can't prove that. Not all of it, Sly said, looking at Eva again. But I think Lily, Eva, was one of them. And I think Sarah found out. There was a long silence. Outside, cicadas had begun to hum, their steady drone filling the space between what was said and what wasn't. Finally, Jerome spoke. So what now? Sly reached into his jacket and pulled out a file folder. Inside were copies of land deeds, old Sunrise rosters, and financial records with Rick's name on them. Shell companies, silent partners, irregular payments. Rick bought the Sunrise property 6 months after it closed, paid in cash through a dummy firm. Then he sat on it. No development, no resale, just silence, like he wanted it erased. Eva's voice was steadier now. Does this mean he's my real father? Sly hesitated. It's possible. I found references to a child, female, born out of wedlock, connected to Rick around that time. No names, just coded files. If that's true, it'd make you his daughter. Or at least, someone he wanted hidden. Eva looked down at her hands, at the ring that suddenly felt heavier. If he wanted me gone, why would he let me live at all? Because Sarah took you before he could finish whatever he started. Maybe he didn't want blood on his hands. Maybe he thought you were too young to matter. But now, he's building something on the Sunrise land. A plaza, luxury retail, antique showcases, the Sunrise Heritage Project. And I think he's going to use it to wash all that history away. Sly leaned forward. Unless we stop him. Jerome's eyes were like flint. What do you need? I need help building a case. Testimony. Evidence. Someone who knew Sarah. Someone who can prove Eva's connection to that place. He turned to the girl. Eva, I need you to be brave. Because going up against Rick Harrison, that's not small. She nodded once. Sarah said I was meant for something. I think this is it. Over the next week, the Monroe house became a war room. Sly made calls, reaching out to old contacts, journalists, retired law enforcement, even a former social worker who'd been fired when Sunrise was shut down. Eva and Jerome went through Sarah's old journals, scanning pages filled with warnings, names, sketches of medical records, even drawings of the old facility's layout. One entry stood out. He's coming next week. Says she's valuable, that her bloodline can protect him. I won't let him take her. The handwriting was tight and panicked. The date was 2 days before Sarah left Charleston. Meanwhile, Rick Harrison's public campaign was in full swing. Billboards across Georgia and South Carolina advertised the upcoming Sunrise Heritage Plaza, a celebration of history and luxury set to open in downtown Atlanta. Rick was making appearances, smiling for cameras, spinning tales about honoring the past. Sly booked a press interview in Savannah. Posing as a documentary producer, interested in stories about repurposed landmarks. Rick took the bait. They met at a high-end steakhouse overlooking the river. Rick looked older than Sly remembered, but his charm hadn't faded. They talked, danced around the past, and then Sly dropped the line. "Remember Sunrise? Shame about that place. Ever wonder what happened to the kids?" Rick smiled, but his eyes darkened. "Some things are better left forgotten." Sly grinned. "Yeah, unless one of them shows up wearing a ruby ring." Rick paused. His fork froze an inch above his plate. "What did you say?" Sly leaned in. "She's alive, Rick, and she remembers." Later that night, Sly returned to the Monroe house. His expression was grim. He knows, and he's scared. Ava looked up from the table, where she'd been sketching the sunrise layout from memory. Good. Let him be scared. The plan took shape. They would crash the opening of the Sunrise Heritage Plaza, use the media presence to tell the real story, and present Sarah's journals and the Sunrise files to the authorities. A former FBI agent, now retired, offered to guide them through the legal steps. Jerome, reluctant at first, agreed to speak publicly. The morning of the event, the plaza sparkled under Atlanta's blue sky. Red carpets lined the walkways, journalists buzzed, and Rick Harrison stood before a crowd of donors and officials, microphone in hand. Eva stood behind the cordoned section, dressed simply but proudly. She held a copy of Sarah's last letter. Jerome stood beside her. Sly, in a dark suit, moved through the crowd like a man on a mission. And when the cameras turned, and Rick began to speak about legacy and preservation, Eva stepped forward. She raised her hand. The ruby ring caught the sunlight. "Legacy?" she said loudly. "You mean like what you did to Sunrise? Like hiding who I am?" The crowd fell silent. Rick's face drained of color. And the truth, finally, had its moment. The silence that fell over the crowd was unnatural, almost suffocating. Rick Harrison stood frozen at the podium, the microphone gripped tightly in his hand as he stared at the girl interrupting his speech. Cameras pivoted in unison, microphones angled toward the child, in the plain dress and worn sneakers, her hand raised high to show a ruby ring that glinted under the Georgia sun, like a drop of fire. Eva Monroe didn't flinch. She stepped forward, voice steady, despite the weight of countless eyes on her. "You lied," she said louder now. "You lied to everyone, and you tried to erase me." Behind her, Jerome and Sylvester emerged from the crowd. Victoria, the journalist who had joined them days ago, held a press badge and already had her phone recording. Rick blinked, his polished composure cracking like thin ice. "I don't know what you think you're doing," he said, forced laughter in his voice. "Young lady, this is a private event. My name is Eva Monroe," she cut in, "but I was born Lily. I was left at Sunrise Children's Home when I was a baby. And you, Rick Harrison, tried to make sure I never found out who I really was." The press surged forward. Security hesitated. No one moved to silence her. Sly took a step beside her and spoke to the cameras, his voice low and solemn. 15 years ago, I gave that ring to a baby girl named Lily at Sunrise. Shortly after, the place was shut down. No warning, no press, no record. But the people behind it, people like Rick, knew what they were doing. They were making children disappear. The air thickened with tension. Whispers rippled through the crowd. Rick tried to laugh again, but it came out choked. "That's absurd. This is a smear campaign. Stallone, you've lost your mind." Victoria stepped forward. "We have documents, financial trails from shell companies connected to your pawn operations, Deposits made to the Sunrise Center from your accounts? Transfers of property? Records from Sarah Monroe, a nurse who risked her life to rescue Ava before you could complete whatever plan you had for her. She handed the file to a nearby journalist. Flashbulbs burst. Reporters began shouting questions. Rick raised both hands as if calming a wild animal, but it was too late. He was no longer in control. Ava's voice trembled now, but she pushed forward. You wanted to use me. You thought a baby with no papers wouldn't matter. But my mom, Sarah, she made sure I got out. She raised me with love. And now I'm here to make sure everyone knows what you did. The moment was too big for Rick to salvage. Someone in the crowd yelled, You trafficked kids? Another voice, What about the property deals? Where are the other children? Security tried to move in, but Sly stepped between them and Eva. Jerome held up a copy of Sarah's handwritten journal. This is your legacy, Rick. Not marble columns and glass storefronts. Just lies. Within an hour, agents from the Georgia Bureau of Investigation arrived on site. Reporters had already sent footage to national outlets. Eva watched as Rick was escorted away, not handcuffed, but clearly defeated. The cameras caught every angle. His silence said everything. It wasn't justice yet, but it was the beginning. That evening, the Monroe house was unusually quiet. Ava sat outside on the porch, legs tucked beneath her, the ruby ring still on her finger. She turned it slowly, watching the light dance across its surface. Sly sat beside her, no words, just presence. Finally, she spoke. Do you think Sarah would be proud of me? She'd be in awe of you, he answered without hesitation. She saved you, but you gave that sacrifice meaning. Inside, Jerome was on the phone with a woman from a non-profit that helped reconnect adoptees with lost records. Victoria was already halfway through writing a story that would change the public narrative around Rick Harrison forever. Across the country, media outlets were picking up the story of a girl with a ring and a past too dangerous to ignore. Over the next few weeks, more people came forward. Former staff from Sunrise, parents who had adopted children through unusual means, families who never got answers about missing paperwork. A slow, painful reckoning began. Rick's name vanished from the Sunrise Heritage Plaza. Construction halted. Lawsuits piled up. And Ava? She went back to school, to her normal walks along the dusty road. But now, people noticed. Neighbors waved with pride. Teachers gave her space when she seemed tired, and classmates who once ignored her now looked with quiet admiration. She didn't enjoy the attention. What mattered was something deeper. With Sly's help, Jerome and Eva began transforming their small garage into something more. It started with a toolbox, then a bench, then flyers that read, Sunrise Garage, run by family, powered by purpose. They offered car repairs, but also free classes on basic mechanics for teens aging out of foster care, for kids like Ava had once been. In time, they opened a second building beside the garage. Not big, not fancy, just clean floors, donated desks, and posters that read things like, You are not forgotten, and Let your past build your strength. They called it the Sunrise Memorial Center. Sly never left Georgia. He turned down roles, closed his agent's email, and stopped answering Hollywood calls. When asked why, he'd only say, I found something more real here. He came by the center almost daily, not as a celebrity, but as family. He fixed leaky sinks, gave talks to the kids, brought coffee and hugs. Ava grew. She didn't forget. She never would. But the fear that once shadowed her steps was gone. In its place, resolve. Every year, on the anniversary of the day she spoke out, she placed the ruby ring in a glass box at the front of the center. Not locked, just displayed. Below it, a plaque read, "She was meant to disappear. Instead, she became impossible to ignore." People came from all over to see it. Some were adoptees, searching for connection. Others were survivors of systems that failed them. All found something in Ava's story that reminded them that truth, even when buried, can still rise. One spring day, as the center buzzed with new students and Sly sat in his usual seat by the window sipping sweet tea, Ava walked in wearing a silver band on her finger. It was simple, unmarked, and perfectly her size. Jerome looked up from under the hood of a Chevy. "What's that?" She smiled. "Something new, something just mine." He nodded. The ruby ring stayed in the glass case where it belonged. But the silver one, that was for the future. And in the quiet town between Valdosta and nowhere, a girl once meant to be forgotten became a symbol of everything that couldn't be erased. This story is a powerful reminder that truth, no matter how deeply buried, has the strength to rise and transform everything. Through the journey of Eva Monroe, a young black girl full of courage and intelligence, we witness the resilience of the human spirit, the importance of integrity, and the quiet bravery it takes to confront a painful past. The narrative also honors the adults who choose compassion over convenience. An uncle with little but love to give, a faded Hollywood icon rediscovering what truly matters, and a foster mother who risked everything to protect a child from the grip of power and corruption. The ruby ring is more than an heirloom. It is a symbol of a promise, of love preserved across time. Written in a tone that is heartfelt and authentic, this story is not only compelling, but deeply reflective. It urges us to consider the value of justice, the healing power of family, and the truth that anyone, no matter their background or age, can become a force for good. From the dusty roads of Georgia to the polished floors of influence, this tale reminds us that the past may hurt, but it can also guide us toward something greater